Much. Thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to be teaching this class. I'm very passionate about this topic. I'll tell you a little bit about my story here in a minute. I was not expecting as many as there are in here, which I'm thrilled about, but I don't know if I'll have time to go through each one of you and get to know you a little bit. But I would like to give you an opportunity, if there's a question, a specific question you're coming into this class hoping will be answered at some point, let me know. Okay? Does anyone here have any specific questions about film scoring that they want answered? And if it's not in my material, I'll do my best, and I'll remind you at the end of this as well, to think of those questions. But if there is anything, let me know. We'll have time at the end to address specific ones that I don't cover in here. Okay? Yes, sir. Okay. Some of that will be answered, but we can circle back to the specifics of that. Any others off the top of your head? Yes, Daniel.
How do you mastering and do you ever have trouble with logic exporting too
Okay. Not in my presentation, but I can. We'll talk about that. Okay. If you think of anything, again, at the end, my goal is to leave time for questions. So think of those, keep them on, write them down if you think of it, and we'll talk about them. The notes that I've given, some of you, that's just for, my goal with this presentation is for you to get what you need out of it, okay? That's why I'm doing a comprehensive overview of film scoring. I don't know each one of you yet, or what part of the film scoring process you're interested in, but my goal is to cover it, the broad approach of film scoring. Many times when you come to an event like this, you get like the nitty-gritty of how to put notes into Logic, how to mix and master those kind of things. But my goal is, let's look at it from a bird's eye view, okay? So that's what we're here to do, but I'm happy to talk to anyone after class with specifics that they want to talk about, okay? My story. All right, a little bit of my story. I was born and raised in Clinton, Iowa. I was just talking to the lovely folks, fellow Midwesterners in the front row. I'm a Midwestern at heart, still there, born and raised, and now live there with my wife and 4 children who are in the back. Took piano lessons. How I got started in music, I started taking piano lessons in 2nd grade and took them through college. I majored in music ministry with an emphasis in piano performance. And so I want to encourage anyone who's in here who's interested in music that maybe isn't planning to go to college for it or didn't study it. That's okay? Not everyone goes that route. It's helpful for sure, but it's not a necessary requirement. I knew I was different from a very early age. I would sit at the piano for long periods of time and write music just in my head and play for hours and hours. I remember the Chronicles of Narnia was always in my head. I always wanted to write the music for the Chronicles of Narnia. And then when I was in high school, the movies came out and I was devastated. It was terrible. So I missed out. But I collected soundtracks when I was young. My peers were not collecting soundtracks. I knew, I was buying the special edition of Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. But again, when I went through college, I only took 1 semester of composing. It wasn't anything film related. It was just enough to get my foot in the door and to really pique my interest in music. Interesting story of how I got started in film composing is I got married right out of college, did not have a lot of money right away, as it happens when you just graduate from college, and just gotten married. And so I worked for an entrepreneur for a number of years, and I just had the idea of, I'm just going to pitch to this entrepreneur that if he funds my first studio, because I couldn't afford all the equipment, if he funds my first studio, I will write music for all of his commercial endeavors as in his entrepreneurial work. And he agreed to it. I was surprised. And so we put the studio in the basement of our apartment complex, and I just started playing and practicing and just figuring out Logic, figuring out how it all works. And that was enough for me to get started. I started with audio drama. Anybody here familiar with audio dramas? Okay, that's kind of where I got my start. Worked on a couple audio dramas musically. Brinkman Adventures was my first one that I did for a decent length of time. And then big dream come true opportunity. I worked for Adventures in Odyssey on a couple episodes as well in the past couple years. So that was kind of my first entrance in, and then gradually I moved over into film, which I absolutely love. And worked up from doing very low paying gigs, then started getting enough opportunities that I had a part-time job and did music, and then the past 3 years I've been full-time doing music and acting. And the Lord has just crazily, as he often does, opened great doors for me to be able to do this and support my family through it. So, got to know about film scoring. If you want to be part of it, or you're a director who's looking to have music in their film, you should know a little bit about the history. I'm just going to do a very quick overview, okay? Started in the 1890s, okay? So this is a very old art form. Started in the silent era, so when films were just starting out, very raw, no audio, nothing. There was music. Individual theaters were outfitted with either pianos or organs, or some even had small ensemble groups of musicians to perform classical music that matched the imagery, okay? And it was up to their discretion. It wasn't like some composer specifically composed for film, okay? So that was from the 1890s through 1929, and then boom, sound happened, synchronized sound with visuals, which was a major breakthrough. Major studios were like, what is this? This is crazy. This will never catch on. And sure enough, people liked hearing movies, and they liked hearing music that matched the visuals. So theaters started outfitting their theaters with audio equipment so that they could play synchronized sound and music. And took a while to develop and mature film scoring after that point, because early on, which I thought this was hilarious, but it makes sense if you think of it, if you eradicate what you know about film scoring and film music. Back in the day when they were first starting out, they thought, well, if there's going to be music in the film, there's got to be a source for the music. You can't just have music play out of nowhere. Makes sense. So you'd have a lovely little romantic scene where husband and wife, for example, are on a park bench. They'd have a violinist stroll right behind the park bench, and the music would come out of that violinist. So they always had to have that kind of like grounding and music. Then they decided, you know what, let's try this. And guess what? People don't really care if they see musicians playing the music, if it enhances the visuals. So you have composers like Max Steiner. Max Steiner was someone who completely set the stage for what film music would become. He did movies like King Kong, is probably one of his biggest known hits in 1939, and just took it, again, to a whole new level. Then in the 1950s and 60s, so that was like 1929 through the 40s. In the 50s and 60s, it was an odd time, in my opinion, for film score. It got very experimental. There was a lot of jazz, which is great. Westerns were big during that time. But we also had this, which composers like Max Steiner had a hard time with. It was really transitioning to studios wanted pop music, because they didn't want to just sell movie tickets. They wanted to sell records. And they saw, with the boom of people like Elvis selling incredible numbers of records, they said, here's an opportunity to make a lot of money. So we're going to require that our opening credits or closing credits have a pop standard. So a lot of composers like Max Steiner were like, no, I'm not doing that, which led to the decline of his career, because he wasn't willing to flex with what the time required. Bernard Herrmann's another one who just said, absolutely not. I'm not doing this passing craze. So that was the 50s and 60s. There was a lot of synth that started in the late 60s, early 70s. So it was really changing the look of what film scoring was. Very edgy. There was a darker tone to it because the 60s and 70s was a tumultuous time with the sexual revolution, the Vietnam War. They had a very dark view of society, and it reflected in the music that was written and the movies that were being made. Then John Williams comes into view, comes onto the scene, full force. 1975, Jaws, okay? Jaws took film scoring, along Jaws and Star Wars in 1977, took everybody back to that old classic film score of the 30s and 40s. Grand, epic, cinematic, incredible. And those films, as you know, did very, very well in theaters. And so since then, I would say it's the renaissance since the 70s of the classic film score has been in place. For about 50 years, there's been a number of different phases, but overall, the orchestral standard film score has been vogue for quite some time. So that brings us up to now. And every composer brings their own flavor to. Get off. What are you? Allow. You have my permission. Okay, well, just ignore that. Where to begin? Okay, so now you have a little idea of the history of film scoring. Where, if you're interested in film scoring, where do you start? That's the question that I had when I first started. Again, this whole festival, which is what I love about this festival, what Cameron and BJ just talked about, Christ over career, okay? That has to be in your mindset as you begin, okay? Do not start going into this career with just an overwhelming love of film and music and film music. You have to go in with an overwhelming love of Jesus Christ. That has to guide your direction, okay? If that's not in place, then you will make decisions in your career that you will regret later, okay? If it's always, you know what, my love for Christ is greater than my love for film, which he gave you. I don't ever want to underestimate the passions he's given you, okay? Listen to those. But he has to be preeminent, okay? And if not, then you're going to make some bad choices, okay? So I just want to blanket that over everything I'm about to say. A couple essentials that I would say are absolutely essential for success as a film composer. A passion for it. If you don't have a passion for film music, you need to have that in place because it is a difficult career. It's very time consuming. It's emotionally draining because you put everything into your music, okay? Natural talent. That's just a given as well. And when I say that, I'm not saying you have to be the most skilled composer in the world to be good at it. But you do have to have some, there's a lot of things I'd love to be good at that I've tried and I'm just not. And so I'm grateful for people who have come alongside me and said, hey, maybe that's not for you. Learning to surround yourself with people who can spot that in you and help nurture that, okay? So natural talent for it, hard work ethic. Takes a lot of hard work to get to where you want to be as a film composer. Humility, okay? Big component. When you're a film composer, you are there to serve the story. You're there to serve the director, and you're there to kind of be in the background, okay? Obviously, those of us who love film music, we hear the music, but that's not the goal of film music, is to be heard. It's to serve the story. A desire and willingness to learn. You're going to get so much feedback, okay? Hopefully from people that you know and trust, okay? But what you do with that feedback is key. Are you going to dig in and say, nope, I like the way I write, I like what I do, I like my sound, this is what I do? Are you going to listen and be teachable and make those changes? You're going to be a better composer if you're willing to do that. Good people skills. okay? This is sometimes overlooked because we think, well, we're just going to be in a studio. No one's going to be really talking to me. It's going to be perfect. But the fact of the matter is you have to interact with humans, okay? And that always requires a certain amount of likability. You need to be able to communicate adequately what your vision is musically and listen to their vision and have that back and forth. You're going to disagree sometimes. And how you handle those disagreements is going to say a lot about you and whether you get future work. Okay. Next up. Well, a couple more things with the previous one, okay? And I'm going to be mindful of our time. 11:15 is my goal, so we have 15 minutes for questions. But start now, okay? For where to begin? Now. Do not wait for an ideal moment because it's not going to come. Just do what you can right now, and you won't regret it. And do what you can with what you have. I think a lot of times we're just like, if I don't have the best programs or the best instruments, instrument software, I just shouldn't even start. No. If you have a piano at home or a keyboard, sit down, start practicing, and listen. Listen to work, other people's work. Consume it. Let it get in there, okay? You can start now. Don't ever let that be an excuse. You will build your way to where you want to be, but if you're not starting now, you never will. Also, you can get really affordable. To start, get a keyboard controller, a digital audio workstation, a DAW, and a computer, okay? Like if you have those, a lot of like Logic, for example, that's a pricier one, comes with built-in instruments, but there's other ones that are free and or very, a small investment. Get those, get a keyboard, which you can also get very cheap keyboards, and start playing, okay? The world is your oyster, musically speaking, okay? Connect with people who are doing what you want to be doing. That one I can't emphasize enough. You want to be a film composer? You should be reaching out to film composers. Connect with them, learn from them, listen to their music, and ask them for advice. Okay, that is one of the biggest things that has enabled me to be where I am today is by doing that. One of the first big connections I made was reaching out to a music supervisor based in LA from LinkedIn, and he responded, and he now represents me as my agent. So I thought he would never get back to me, realistically. And that mindset has to go away, okay? Try it. They may not. I have sent thousands of emails, cold emails, most of them not answered, okay? So you got to be okay with that. But you have to do it. You will be shocked who gets back to you and who's willing to have conversations with you. Ask for a 10 to 15, this has worked wonders for me as well. Ask for a 10 to 15 minute Zoom meeting. Okay? Just have a few questions for you. Could you give me 10 to 15 minutes? And keep it to 10 to 15 minutes. Okay? If they say yes. And have questions prepared. Okay? They love helping young composers. I guarantee you, if you connect with them and they're willing to speak with you, they are incredible to work with, okay? So just ask. And I mentioned this before, know what your standards are before starting, okay? Don't get into this industry and then start thinking, well, should I do this movie? Is this kind of what I want to do? Because even though, as an actor, I have to make that decision as well, too, where I'm on the face of the screen, music's the same thing, okay? Just because your face isn't on a movie, it's sometimes like, will people really care if my name's on it? It doesn't matter what other people think. It matters what your Savior thinks. And he wants you to be very careful about the decisions you're making in film, okay? How to land your first big gig and keep landing big gigs, okay? That's the next step. You get started. Now you want to know, how do I keep doing this? Put yourself out there, okay? Network. Use social media to your advantage. We'll talk about marketing a little bit here later. Do your research, okay? IMDb Pro is a fantastic tool for research. If you don't have that, it's a yearly investment, but the amount of info you can get from IMDb Pro is amazing. You can get some personal email addresses, phone numbers, you can get contact info. So if you want to get into this, I highly recommend IMDb Pro. LinkedIn is another underutilized networking tool, okay? Again, some of the best connections I've made have been through LinkedIn. So do that. Rocket Reach, okay? This is another one. Rocket Reach helps you find people's email addresses, okay? So I think you get 5 free searches a month, so use them sparingly, but, or if you want to pay for it, you can. I never have. But you can take a LinkedIn profile of someone you want to get in touch with, and maybe they're not answering your connection request. You can use the URL of their LinkedIn, plug it into Rocket Reach, and it'll give you some of their contact info. Most of the time, email. I don't do phone. I think that's a little shocking to someone to get a phone call from someone they don't know. But an email, they're probably getting a lot of cold emails anyway, okay? So I advise the email route when you're doing that kind of reaching out. Don't be afraid to ask big, okay? When you're reaching out to a potential director or producer, ask them about scoring their next film. Ask them to demo for them. There's plenty of things. Ask to assist whoever's composing for the next project. Those kind of things. You gotta make sure they know you want to work. Okay. Again, demoing is a big normal thing in this industry. Rather than just hiring a composer, oftentimes they will demo different composers, unless they have some loyalty in place already, which often happens a lot too. But if they're open to other composers, they'll have you demo, which you do for free, which is time-consuming, which can be hard. But it is industry standard to just offer to do a free demo, okay? And that at least lets them hear your work and gets you on their radar, okay? Again, offer to assist composers. I connected with a composer named Ryan Shore, and if you guys know Howard Shore, who did Lord of the Rings. He was the film composer for all of the Lord of the Rings films. It's his nephew, actually, and he's also doing film music out in LA. And we connected, had a couple Zoom meetings, and he asked me to come on. It didn't end up working out, but he asked me to come on board as his assistant for a Netflix rom-com he was working on. Ended up that our schedules, it just didn't work out, but we had that relationship in place, and he felt confident enough in my abilities to come alongside him and help him do that film. So assisting other composers is a great way. They'll give you, how that works is they'll compose a lot of the main parts of the film, the main themes, the best scenes in the film, but there's a lot of just underscore that maybe they just don't want to do that they'll entrust to you, okay? Great opportunity to work. So remember assisting. Big thing, keep writing, okay? No matter if it's a lull in your career or whatever, just keep on writing. Every day, get in your studio, start plunking out some music. Find out what makes you unique as a composer and capitalize on it, okay? Use that to your advantage. Every composer has a different style, has a different way of orchestrating, has a different tendency toward melodic development, harmonization, all of that stuff. Whatever makes you unique, lean into it, okay? And pray for new opportunities. If God wants you to be doing this, he's going to open the doors, okay? Far better than we are going to be at pushing doors open, okay? But work hard, okay? This one, hate this question. Hate this question. As a composer, this is the last thing you want to talk about is the money. Most artists, okay? We just want to make art. Don't ask us what we want to charge for it, okay? But the fact of the matter is, if you want to eat, if you want a house, stuff like that, you gotta charge for it. So my first word of advice is don't panic and say I'll do it for free, okay? Because that's not going to serve you very well in the long run. Obviously, early on, I did free work early in my career, and absolutely was essential just to start, okay? But you need to know at what point that's not going to work anymore, okay? And to be able to trust your abilities enough that say, you know what, I need to charge for this. And you got to walk that fine line of knowing what you're worth and not having a bloated idea of your abilities, okay? There is a fine line there, and you got to find it and stick to it, okay? Early on, you'll need to start low, work your way up, gain experience, build upon it, and your prices will follow suit, okay? Know what your bottom line is and stick to it, okay? I want to emphasize that, or you'll burn out, and then you won't want to be a film composer at all. Even if you're really gifted at it and love it, you will burn out and you'll say, I'm done. So, know what your bottom line is. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're taking notes and if you have thoughts of becoming a film composer, make production make the first move, okay? Can't emphasize that enough. That's one thing I have learned from the man who represents me. He said, anytime someone reaches out to you with a potential opportunity, they have a number in mind. Okay, they're not coming to you with or they shouldn't be. Okay, if they are someone who knows how to run a production, make a movie, they have a line item in their budget for music. Okay, so they may flex on it a little bit, but you are going to be at a disadvantage, at least in my own experience. You just want the work, and so you lowball yourself. And then they're like, sure, that's great, we'll do it for that. And then you're like, oh no, what did I do? So you ask them, what's your budget for film, or for film music? I'll see if I can make that work. Okay, so that makes them say at least a number that they're thinking. Then you can negotiate from there and figure out if it's a good fit for you. But if they give a ridiculously low number, then you know this probably isn't the production for me. Yes, Daniel. Yes.
I've never successfully been able to, like, they always have a comeback and it's like, oh, so what's your rate? He's like, well, what's your budget? So do you scale? Like, I don't know, how do you break this scale?
Yeah, I mean, I stick to it. Like, I do have a per minute rate as well, which some people want. But for a big film, like a 90-minute film, a per minute rate isn't going to apply because it's going to be far exceed most people's 90-minute budget, okay, for film music. So if it's a feature length film, for short films, yeah, I'll throw out my per minute rate. But for feature length films, I won't. I'll just say I need to know I try to work within a budget. That's what I always say. Try to work within whatever's available if I can make it work. So no, I would encourage you to stand your ground in those instances. For short projects, like 3 to 5 minute films, 10-minute films, give them a per minute rate that you're comfortable with and go from there, okay? It is tricky. Again, the whole people skills aspect, it is sometimes very uncomfortable. Yes? Yes. Yep. Yes, exactly. And that's another thing. Like, typically an average percentage, which is all over the map, but as far as industry standard, like 3 to 5% of a film budget is dedicated to music, okay, of a total film budget. So that can kind of give you a little bit of an idea. Most films you're going to do probably will not fall in that 3 to 5%. But ideally, again, if you just are looking for a starting place, you can ask for a total budget and do that kind of figuring. And it's also going to depend how heavy the orchestration is, what type of film is this. If it's Lord of the Rings and they want to give you a teeny little, it's not going to be worth it. But if it's light instrumentation, just piano and strings, for example, not a lot of cues, so you just try and get more, like he was saying, get more information. How music heavy is it? How much, what are your favorite like, what are you hoping it'll sound like? That'll kind of give you an idea of what they're hoping for and therefore what the budget should be, okay? Great question. it is a fine line of knowing when to stand your ground and give a little. If possible, ask for payments to be spread out. Okay, this is another thing. If you're hoping to do this full time, this is another thing I would strongly advise you do. Ask for 3 installments, okay? Ask for the first third upon signing of a contract. Ask for the second third when you start the spotting process, where you watch the film with the director and they decide where music's going to be. Ask for a third there, then third at the completion of final delivery of all of the music, okay? So that span can last you a few months instead of saying, sign on and we'll pay you at the end. You're going to be waiting and waiting and waiting and rushing your work because you're like, I need money. So that is a great, and that's, again, people understand that and should be willing to accommodate that for you. Okay, moving quickly. Congrats, you got the job. Woo! Now what? Get the timeline nailed down. That's first and foremost. You need to make sure that you can make it work in your schedule to do what they are asking of you. When will I get a locked edit? Okay, you work as a composer from a locked edit, ideally, so that they're not making changes on you and changing all the times of your music cues, okay? So ask, when can I expect a locked edit? What is the deadline for music? Okay, so you need to do the math. When I get the locked edit, are they asking for it 2 weeks later? Is this realistic? You need to work those things out. Is there flexibility if need be? Or is a distributor like, nope, we need this May 31st. If there's flexibility, use it. If not, then you really need to make sure you can hit that hard deadline. Be careful how many projects you take on, especially early on in your career. If you take on too many projects and it's confusing to you and you're getting stressed, you need to do one at a time. Start with one at a time, tackle those beasts, and take on the next one. Have some sort of agreement in place, okay? This is another thing that sometimes, I would say a lot of times, especially in the faith-based world, we do a lot of things out of trust, which is great. We should trust each other. But the reality of the fact, is that the right word? Thank you. Okay. Agreements are a good thing to have in place, okay? It doesn't have to be super crazy. Just say, this is what I expect, this is what I'll deliver, and let's shake on it. Like that basic stuff, have an agreement in place. Ask the director. Again, you're serving the director. How do you like to work? How do you like to work with composers? That's going to be vastly, like there are so many different ways to work with composers. I'm working with one right now that is the most hands-off director I've ever worked with, and we did the spotting session, and all that pretty much I got out of it was, we like what you do, so just do what you want. Okay, so sometimes you get that, and then sometimes you get, okay, from 13 seconds to 32 seconds, I want this, and this is what I want it to sound like, and there's temp music in there, and I want it to sound exactly like the temp music, and then, so that is the reality for some composers and some projects. You have to do that, okay? It's sometimes really frustrating as creatives to be like, then why don't you just use that? But the fact is, they don't want to pay for the royalties of that. So just work with your director. If you want to work again, work well with your director. That's how you get that kind of loyalty. You think of Spielberg and Williams, for example. That kind of loyalty happens because they work together well, okay? Stephen gives a vision, John matches the vision. That's what you need. Then you get that loyalty of every time a new film comes around, guess who they're going to call? You, because they like working with you, okay? If you constantly push against what they want you to do, you are not going to get repeat work. Stay in touch throughout the process. I also learned this recently. Had a very unfortunate experience that came out of this, but they had a tight deadline, 3.5 weeks for a 90-minute film, and incredibly stressful 3.5 weeks. Was not time to go back and forth with the director at all about music. It was, we need music, get it done in 3.5 weeks. Got to the end, didn't match their vision at all. Hired a different composer. That happens, okay? So those kind of things, you want to avoid that. stay in touch. Stay in touch with the director. Say, hey, can I send you cues at the end of every week just so we can talk about it throughout the entire process? If that communication is not in place, that's going to happen. Okay? So know what their vision is and make sure that you are in touch. Okay? Even if it's a fast timeline, it's not worth your time.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In regard to the deliverables, how often do you get asked for stems when it gives them the ability to remix?
Yes.
Is that very common?
That's very common. Yep.
Individual stems or groupings?
Groupings is normal for what I've done. Okay, so they'll ask for the piano or keyboards, harps, strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, at least that breakdown. They may request, if there's solo instruments, for example, or something, they may ask for smaller stems, but it is pretty common to ask for stems to do further mixing. Ideally, we do a lot of the mixing ourselves, at least basic mixing, and then whoever the audio guy is will obviously refine it and make sure it fits with the dialogue. But great question. Yes, it is pretty common. The basics, film scoring and orchestration, again, this is a broad overview. Everyone's process is going to look different here, okay? So don't freak out if you're like, well, that's not the way I work. I hope that's okay. Find what works for you and allows you to be as efficient as possible. Efficiency is huge with film scoring. For the sake of flow, I'll just give you my process. For the sake of flow, I love working from film start to film's end. Some don't do that. Some will skip around. If they get stuck creatively, they'll just skip to another part of the film and start writing. For me, I'd rather just I want the flow of the story. I want it to match my emotional journey to match the film's emotional journey. If you have time, okay, and again, this is something that you're not always given, develop melodies, okay? You want to be a memorable composer, you better write memorable melodies, okay? It's not all about how perfect your stuff sounds, how lush your orchestrations are. Really, when it comes right down to it, if your melodies are memorable, people are going to remember you, okay? You think of any great composer that you love, melodies come to your mind, okay? So remember that. You may not have a ton of time to go back and forth with a director developing melodies because you're not working on multi-million-dollar projects, but whatever you can, get some melodies out there. Make them memorable. Find your go-to instrument and let it be your guide. Mine is piano. So pretty much every cue I write will start with piano, just for me to work through what I want it to sound like, and then I remove the piano and orchestrate it without piano, okay? But if you play an instrument like a clarinet or a flute, use whatever you're familiar with to just get the ball rolling. Get your creative process started. Templates save a ton of time. Okay, I used to custom do every single song I used to do. And I had a number of composers come next to me and like, what are you doing? You're wasting so much time. So have templates in place, okay? You want to have a small ensemble template. You have, for your big orchestration, have it all built out. Then you literally click load template and boom, you've got your strings, woodwinds, brass, percussion, anything you would want at your fingertips. Then you're not waiting for your computer to load instruments every time you have a creative idea and then you're like, wait, what did I just want to write? And it goes away. Templates allow you to work quickly, which is essential. Go with your gut. That's another thing that I always encourage composers. There's a reason they hired you. Okay, so don't second guess every decision you're making as a composer. Go with your gut. If they don't like it, they'll tell you. But they're hiring you because they trust your gut to do what it's designed to do. Enhance, don't distract. This is a fine line for composers to play. You want people to notice your music. But the reality is the director wants his film to shine, not just your music. He wants the film to shine. So how do you do that? One thing that I always encourage, this is a tough thing to master. But during scenes that are not dialogue, okay, nice landscapes, anything that is just setting the scene, have fun, okay? Music takes a front seat. When there's dialogue, you need to find ways to enhance the emotions but stay under the words. Because if they lose the words, you've failed at your job, okay? And even that applies to orchestration, okay? If you've got, for example, a woman speaking, has a higher timbre in her voice, you're going to want to use instruments that are not in her register, because that will, I know it sounds too picky, but frequencies can collide, and you end up conflicting with her voice. So you got to find, if it's high, you need to find ones that are in the mid-range or lower that enhance and support what she's saying, but don't distract, and vice versa. A lot of times if it's rumbly and low, then you can use higher instruments that help balance all of that out, okay? So just play around with that. Figure out, how do I hide under the dialogue, do my job, but don't stand out. There's pretty much two options when scoring a scene. You compose to the emotional arc, or you compose against the natural emotional arc, okay? Both of those can be very, very effective. The obviously more common is to, if there's a love scene going on, you do love music, okay? But it can be very powerful to have a scene where people you think are meant to feel a certain way. You compose against that grain, and it really creates a pretty cool effect. So just know, going into it, what the director wants, okay? This is a big one. Your music doesn't always have to land on specific cuts of the film. I think early on I used to think, okay, well, the downbeat has to be right when the person sets down a drink or like closes his door. I need a downbeat right there. No, you don't need to have those again, there's a natural flow. Feel that, and don't force things that don't need to be there, okay? Save often, okay? You do not want to lose your work. Yes. People will want you to deliver your cues in different ways. My favorite way is just your cue start times, okay? Where you obviously have a timestamp with the film you're working on. Put those, each start time, make a list, and that enables them to just obviously drop your cues right into their project, not even have to think about where it needs to go. And know how you're supposed to deliver your cue. Orchestration is a playground, okay? That's so much fun. I think you can get a little nervous about orchestration, but the fact of the matter is that is where the fun is. That's where all the colors come from. You can have a great melody that's just because you don't play around with what's the best instrument for this melody. A couple of my favorite combos. This is not everybody's, but my favorite. Cellos and French horns sound great together. Okay, thank you. Yes, they're both very rich sounding, and they complement each other very, very well. Violas and English horns, a couple different woodwinds, but violas and English horns, again, the timbre of those instruments sound really nice together. Flutes and clarinets. If you've got like a melody that's on, for example, like sixths, so like a C and an A that moves around, great opportunity to do flute on the high one, clarinet on the low one. Those create some beautiful complementary harmonizations. Strings and voices, okay? Choirs, the natural human voice with strings. So beautiful. Most of my favorite composers use those combinations incredibly well. Another thing I do that I love, double piano and celeste. If you ever want like a different sound other than just like a piano lead, if you add a little bit of like bell to it and create that nice innocent lullaby type sound that's a little softer, that's a beautiful combination as well. So those are just a few that came to mind that I use a lot. Don't overscore, Okay, that's another temptation. Your desire will be often to do wall-to-wall music, only serve the scenes. If there's no emotion there, again, we're as composers, we're to enhance emotion. If the emotion is not there, then it doesn't need enhancing, okay? That's something I've had to learn over time too. It's a difficult line to walk. Okay, keys to maintaining healthy and long-lasting relationships. I will wrap in the next 5 minutes so you guys can ask questions. You want to get work, yes. You want to get repeat work. And how you do that is maintain good, healthy relationships with those people who hire you, okay? Couple things. Get to know them and invest in the relationship. I can't overemphasize that. I've met many people who you come to events like this or just in reaching out to them, you reach out and immediately want something out of them rather than pouring into them, okay? Do not be a leech. This is a biblical concept. We should be serving one another, okay? Let the Lord do his work about bringing work back to you, okay? Invest in the relationship. Keep in touch, not annoyingly so, but stay in touch with them so you don't leave their mind. When you work with someone, send them a handwritten thank you. That goes a very long way, okay? And again, one thing that I ask a lot that someone had advised me to do, when reaching out to someone, ask what they're passionate about right now. If it's a director, what are you working on right now that you're really passionate about? Everybody loves to talk about what they're passionate about. You know, sometimes people are just like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask. Ask them what they're excited about. They will tell you. Okay, you don't have to ask any other questions. Ask them what they're excited about. Boof, you'll have an opportunity to hear what they're working on. How to market yourself as a film composer. This is tough, okay? A lot of film composers prefer to just be in a studio and do what they do and not any of the PR stuff. But the fact of the matter is, you need to be, okay? Obviously, you need to be easy to work with, okay? That's numero uno. Happy clients are going to be your best marketers. Referrals are the best way to get work. Trusted directors refer to another trusted director. This composer did great work, okay? Hire him. Ask for testimonials and referrals. If you have a really good experience, ask them for a testimonial. They'll be happy to give it if they really loved working with you, okay? Have a solid website and an easy way to be contacted. I have had multiple composers who have reached out to me, and I go to their website, and I'm like, I don't know anything about you. I don't know about you. If they even have a website. I don't know what your music sounds like. I don't know who you are. You want to have a place where people can just go to your website, figure out who you are, know what your music sounds like, and then have an easy way to reach out to you if they like you, okay? Network. An event like this is great for that, okay? Take advantage of the opportunity to meet with a bunch of different types of people doing different jobs within the film world, and again, invest in those relationships. Be active on social media, okay? This is not in a look at me, I'm amazing sort of way, okay? That's not what social media is for, but more of a authentic, this is my journey. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm involved in right now. I hope you'll join me in this journey, okay? Be authentic, be genuine, be relatable on social media, okay? It can be a terrible tool. It's often used terribly. But the fact of the matter is, I've gotten some work based on social media presence, okay? It's just the reality. If people don't know anything about you and you're not popping up on their feeds that they're looking at every single day in some way, shape, or form, probably the person who's really, really good and popping up on their networks are going to get the job, okay? So just an encouragement, put it out there. If you're a composer, put some music out there. Ask people to give feedback or share it. Anything like that. Stay present, stay relevant, okay? And that, my friends, is it. 10 minutes for questions, okay? Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, Caleb?
When you're scoring a scene, personally, how do you support the mood and the emotions that are being communicated without dictating to the audience how to feel, without telling them how to feel?
That's a great question. Um, I again, you're going to be working with so many different kinds of movies. If a movie is done well, the emotions should be the emotion of what's to be conveyed should be felt through visuals alone. Like obviously music, again, I always say music enhances what's already there. So you're not really dictating how people should feel because you're going through the same process that viewers are. You're watching the movie and you think, okay, this music supports the emotion that I'm being conveyed. So hopefully that should align. But in some sense, as a composer, you do dictate. Because again, if you're composing against the emotional grain, you're dictating to the audience, don't feel the love here, feel that there's some tension here. Like something's going to happen, even though there's some great stuff happening. So uh, you are dictating to an extent, but overall, the visuals should do most of the dictating for you, and you're just there to support. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It is definitely a combination of that. A lot of it is going to be your natural intuition. Um, but, I use the word play a lot when it comes to music. That is a lot of what we do. So when you do sit down at a piano to come up with a memorable melody, um, I would I would say this. A lot of times composers are perfectionists in many ways. And so if a melody sticks in your brain, it's probably going to stick in the brains of others. Okay. Another great thing, like for me, figuring out a melody at home, if I hear my wife or kids humming or singing what I had already written, that is to me like a oh, green light. That's working. Okay. So if you can get other ears on it and get other people's input on it, but a lot of it will be okay. What's the scene? Who's this character? If you're writing, a leitmotif for a particular character, know what their story arc is. Know what are they innocent? Are they devious? Know what their backstory is, and then work from there. Play. Just sit at a piano. What sounds good? And the key being, don't make a melody too short. Don't make it too long. You got to find that sweet spot. But a lot of it will be natural intuition. Yes. Y- Yeah, again, that will be how much time you have allotted. So, a film that I'm doing currently, I found out I was doing it like a year ago. So, when you have that kind of time, I'd encourage you to sit down, write some themes on the piano or whatever your instrument of choice is. Send it to them in advance. Say, what do you think of this theme? You like this theme? What would you do differently? Um, and if they love it, it's so nice that you can lock that theme in. Okay, you don't even have to think about it when you're writing because you already have that theme developed. So if you have time, yes, get with the director in advance and work that back and forth. Most of the time, I would say you probably aren't going to have that luxury. A lot of times, people are going to hire you right as they need a composer, which is unfortunate. But in those instances, You can ask them how they'd like to do it, but my preference is, ever since some bad things that happen, is stay in regular contact. The way I'm working right now is at the end of every week, I'm sending my cues to the audio guy, and he's putting them in the films or in the clips that he's been working on too, and then sending them for approval along the way, just because they want it done at a certain time, and we're like, this is probably the most efficient way to do this, and to make sure that you love what we're doing along the process, so that when we get to the end, you're not making tons of changes because they've loved what you've been doing along the way. Okay, so just have those conversations with the director, but in whatever way you can, send them stuff periodically, just so they know where you're at and if they like it. Yes.
Right now, I'm getting quite a lot of documentaries to score, but I really want to do television and film drama.
Hmm.
You recommend that pathway to get into something different, even though you're giving work,
Yes.
and I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Really, my passion is drama.
Yeah.
You recommend how it goes down?
Yeah. Well, I think be encouraged. A lot of what happens in documentary happens in dramatic film. So there's definitely overlap in what you're doing and where you'd like to be. What I'd recommend is find the directors who are working on the type of content you want to work on, and create a demo reel with that style of music. Whether you have to write new music to fit the style of what type of film you want to work on, create a nice 1 to 2 minute demo of your best work in that genre, and then start sending it out to directors you'd love to work with, and just say, hey, I love the type of movies you do. Here's a sample of my music, and I do documentaries. Like it's nothing to be like, man, I just do documentaries. Documentaries are powerful. People understand that, and are happy to work with documentary composers.
Along those lines, would you send that with visuals, something you edited, or just the music?
I typically just send the music. If you have visuals that go along with it, like if you have a demo reel that includes work you've done that's in film, but it's not expected. I think a lot of times people are happy with just to hear what you could bring to the table.
Spark their imagination.
Sure, sure, you can do that. It won't work against you if you choose to do that. But if you don't have like the true demo reel of having the film ready to share with someone, music's just fine. Okay. Yes.
Say I want to make a music video
Yeah.
that I would use as a demo to try and raise money to make a musical. How much would it cost me to have somebody perform one really nice
Song.
music video? Yeah.
Okay. So again, the per minute rate is what you're probably going to be dealing with for one song. I would say you're probably going to be looking at 100 to 500 per minute of music. Like that's maybe a rough estimation of how much it would cost for a composer like me, for example, to agree to come on and do that. Okay. So if it's a 3-minute song, you'd be looking at $3,000 for the composer, and then videography. Whoever's a videographer in the room, I don't know how much they would charge for a 3-minute. A singer would probably do it for less, most likely, depending on the caliber of singer. But typically, singing will take less time than scoring. Again, it's going to vary drastically depending on a couple $100 maybe. Yes, John.
What do you include in your orchestrations? That's in, like, when you write them out and everything, do you include the, finale file, everything else spins, or what?
Yeah. So when you work with Logic, it doesn't output sheet music very well in general. It's pretty. I've found that it's not very exact. So if you're scoring for live orchestra, then definitely you're going to have to use like Finale or something Sibelius, some other instrument that's designed more for printing out music to be performed. I haven't had the luxury of having a full orchestra perform yet. So most of the time they just want your stems, exported wave stems for them to mix and work with. But if you plan on having it recorded live, yes, you will need to do that. Sure. Yep. Got it. Yes, it is. So if you're looking at bigger budgets, a lot of times, for one thing, your teams are going to be way bigger. Okay, so composers, I have learned, they don't do a lot of, unless they're a certain brand of composer, they will write the cues, hand it off to their orchestration team, and the orchestration team will handle all of the arranging. The composer's not even in that mindset. And some composers even less than that. Some composers literally will write a melody line on a piano. We're talking A-list composers who are working on tight turnarounds. They'll write a melody on piano, hand it off to their arranging and orchestration team to write like they would write and sound exactly like them. So again, if you're dealing with a big budget, you're probably going to either be the composer or the orchestrator or arranger. So whichever one you're more passionate about, I would lean into that. But for smaller films, you will be orchestrator, arranger, and composer. So what you're learning is invaluable to what you hope to be doing with orchestration. Yes?
What is your favorite soundtrack and why?
How dare you ask that question? Favorite soundtrack and why? I would probably say currently, and my favorite film composer is John Williams, hands down. But I would say if I were to pick a film that the score emotionally moves me in ways that I listen to it all the time. Forrest Gump would be up there, Alan Silvestri. Another relatively little-known soundtrack, William Ross wrote My Dog Skip. Especially if you're a dog lover, that score will get you. But I would say, okay, historically speaking, I would have to say Star Wars. Just as far as soundtracks that made me want to become a film composer, it was probably listening to Star Wars. And when I knew I wanted to be a film composer, I saw John Williams in concert. I was a senior in high school, and I was listening to the Olympic fanfare. I'll never forget it, the one he wrote for the Olympics. That was the moment I knew I wanted to be a film composer. So it's really hard to narrow down because honestly, it's depending on the time of your life. There's certain stages of my life that I associate with different scores that I've listened to. But lately, it's been a lot of My Dog Skip. Yes. We're out of time. I will stay after and talk. I just don't want to hold anybody here who wants to get started to go eat, okay? But I will be available for questions. I know, Daniel, I need to answer yours specifically about Logic. But I do want to thank everyone for being here. This was so fun to have all of you here. Thank you for being engaged listeners and participatory. It was great. And again, yes, anybody who has other questions that we didn't get to answer, stay and I'll answer them. Okay? Thank you.